Well, welcome everybody. We're back for 2021-22, and it's a privilege indeed to have the club president, Michael Hayes, with us today. Michael, welcome.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks for having me.
I know this is your second time on the 1860 Club. You did it with your brother-in-law, I think, very early in the piece.
Yeah, I think we're one of the first ones to do one of these Zooms, and yeah, it was a bit of fun with Alex as well. I think Alex handled the video, so
yeah,
good to be here.
Well, before we start talking about the club for the coming season, let's talk about you and your journey at the club. It's been quite extraordinary in itself, but how did it all begin, Michael?
Well, I started playing junior cricket a long time ago now at Banyule. This was before they actually had a junior club. So the team that I was involved with were the first crop of juniors coming through. So there was no 14s or 16s. We started out as the under 12s, then played under 14s. We were overly good. We got beaten quite comprehensively most weeks, but it wasn't until I played with my coach at the time was Ashley Gannon. The coach at the time, he said you need to go and get on play on turf. So I played Dowling, played under 16 Dowling, but it was more so when I was 14. Ashley said go play turf, and I had two clubs to contact. One was Ivanhoe, and one was Preston. At the time, I rang up Ivanhoe, never received a phone call back from them. Then I spoke to Preston, and funnily enough, it was Steve Wilson who answered the phone and invited me down to train and come down and experience it. And here I was, just a young 14-year-old, and grandfather took me down and got introduced to Molly, who was coach. Molly was also captain of the ones, but mainly got introduced to a gentleman called Steve Hillen. And they made me feel very warm right from the first pre-season training session. But also I think the other thing was there was another 3 or 4 players the same age as me down there. Gavin de Kretzer, Lee Stewart, Andrew Bennett I think was playing his second season. But there was also a couple of other younger faces, Trent Lawrence, who was also down there as well. And it was just a really, really good little experience, good pre-season. And obviously we got playing with Steve Hillen, and I actually sort of started my time at Preston as more of a spin bowler. A lot of players nowadays would probably scratch their head at them and go, no, you can't bowl at all. But when I first started, it was a case where I played as a spinner and we could bat a little bit. And luckily enough, had a really good first season, but just a really good experience playing cricket with Steve Hillen and Ian Murray at the time. Jimmy Lawrence was there. Obviously, Dave Robinson was also there. And I got to have a really good time with them. Having the kids and the experienced players was realistic with my sort of pre-apprenticeship, the turf cricket, and had an opportunity to play Dowling with Melbourne University. But yeah, that's where it sort of all started. Actually played Dowling as a spin bowler, so which is even more crazy. But yeah, I had I didn't really know too much about Preston before I came down there. My grandfather at the time wasn't heavily involved with the local club or a local sporting club, so it was a matter of going down there, and I was very fresh, very young. Didn't say overly much at the time, but yeah, just took it all in, and that was it was amazing. The first year I had at Preston was probably one of my favourites.
Fantastic. Gee, what a loss to Ivanhoe 25 years later.
Well, yeah, it's ironic that when every time a couple of times I played against Ivanhoe, and I have actually mentioned that whether or not things would have been different. So, that was 97, 98 was my first season. So at Preston.
Gus was always meticulous, returning a phone call. It cost him nothing.
Hasn't changed 24 years later.
And we got you for 25 years. That was a pretty good phone call.
Yeah, look, it's worked both ways. For me, Preston has shaped my life completely. So not too sure how it would have turned out if Preston wasn't in my life.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's definitely... And I suppose the thing is, when I came down, I looked up to a lot of those players. I slowly, got the realisation of who these players were. And Darren Oliver was one who has always kept a very watchful eye on the threes and fours, and especially the young kids. And he was one of the ones who sort of really challenged and pushed the younger kids to go further.
Yeah. Quite unique in the context that, you're virtually a present day player, but you've had a connection with the really old brigade, people of my age going back, some of the legends at the club of Ian Murray that you mentioned and Steve Hillam, in particular Jimmy Lawrence as well. So that's an amazing sort of connection. Over the years, you worked your way presumably from the fourth through to the threes and seconds. The spinning made way for batting?
Well, it was, I suppose, I had the opportunity to go around with both, but mainly it was bowling and then batting. But back then it was sort of a little bit more ruthless when it came to bowlers. You bowled a bad ball, one or two bad balls, you sort of got taken off. It was a discipline thing. Now that probably, I suppose, I understood at the time, but in the long-term longevity didn't work well with the bowling in terms of, if you bowl a bad ball, you get taken off, you lose confidence. You don't sort of really learn how to bowl long spells. And it was up to, I suppose, training, and as soon as you got the ball, take on the opportunity to take it. So yeah, I sort of kept on working as a batsman, I suppose. And then, yeah, sort of gave away with the bowling through, I suppose, obviously, the opportunities when you bowl bad balls and bad spells, you possibly don't get the opportunity again. So it was really, like, with Darren Oliver, who sort of really pushed the bowling as well, gave me the opportunity to say, right, I always remember the game we played, it was at Noble Park. He just turned around. It was very early in the piece. Jason Fairbrother was playing, and Carthy was playing as well. And he just said, Hazy, are you ready to bowl? And this was about the 20th over. I didn't usually bowl until about the 35th, maybe 40th over, being 17. And he said, are you ready to bowl? I'm like, yeah, let's go, let's bowl. I got a couple early in the spell, and that gave me some confidence. But spin bowling, I think, is very much about having a really good captain. You've got to have a really, really good captain to understand the process involved and what the spinners try to do. And allowing for mistakes to happen as well. So
getting the field set, giving the confidence, bowling you at the right time, easing you at the right time, it's critical, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose it's one of the things I've learned now as a captain. I've used that experience for myself to say, well, if I've got a young spinner, I can go down the path of giving them a bit of time to settle in, and they make mistakes, that's fine. They'll learn from it. So yeah, look, I think I wouldn't classify myself as being one of the all-time great players at Preston Cricket Club. I'm probably the furthest thing from that. It's I probably didn't, at one point, I don't think I fulfilled my potential. I don't think. I suppose it's when you turn 18, 19, it's one of those things where you find the girls, you find the good, the nightlife and that, and your work ethic to cricket for me sort of didn't really excel. I didn't really push on and work as hard as I possibly should have. That's probably one of my regrets as a player. Was not really working as hard as I possibly could to get the best out of myself. It's been a learning curve over my journey, and there's things I would have done a hell of a lot differently if I had my time again.
I can understand. Now, you played nearly 150 games in the twos Was that? Did you play some firsts along the way, along that journey?
Yep. I reckon I probably would have played about 20, probably 30 first game before I went back to the twos, and I captained the twos from about 2010, I think it was. I reckon I probably would have had about 8 full seasons of captaining the twos. And then the last 2 seasons, I had captained the ones. So, and I had a year off with the kids. I had half a year off when I had Lexi, and then had a year off when Max came and coached a season at Old Paradians, and then Alex got me back to captain the twos. So
fantastic. And captain of the ones at Preston, a great honour. And the season just gone, you know, you had an excellent season with the team, making the finals, and you played very well yourself. You were very stiff not to actually go through deeper into the finals. Just the weather interfered with that. But what were your thoughts on the season last year?
Last year was obviously different because of COVID. It sort of worked a little bit in my favour. As a captain, my preference is captaining 1 days, and obviously you can plan for the season. You knew exactly what you're playing each week, so you could put plans in place right from the first round where you're playing 1 day. We selected teams based on obviously 1 day cricket, genuine 1 day players, and having a couple of Sri Lankans come on board as well, which was very helpful. The season for me, I believe we slightly underachieved. I think a lot of people wouldn't have expected us to play finals at the start of the season. However, we sort of knew what we had and what we could use, what tools we had to use in 1 day cricket. And playing Plenty Valley that first final, even though it was unlucky, the weather, we had a second chance at that on the Sunday, and I think most players would say we didn't play to our potential. We didn't give ourselves every chance to win the game. To use the rain that we had the day before as an excuse, that doesn't sit well with me. We had an opportunity to win that game, make it 150, 160, and put them under pressure, and we sort of failed to do that. But in terms of as a club going to the next level, us playing finals was very important for us to get our name out there as a serious team. So it was.
And you played some excellent cricket along the way. You had a couple of big scalps, didn't you?
Beating Williamstown was a good one. Knocking them off round 3 was a really good one. Beating Hoppers Crossing towards the end was one. Yarraville as well. There's a definitely a gap between the top 4 teams in the comp. Funnily enough, it was Werribee who ended up winning it.
Yes.
And they were the best team. They weren't the best team of individuals, but they were collectively, they played good team cricket. That was one of the things that after we played them, I think I made the comment to the playing group, that's the best team we will play all season, because they knew one another, they knew how to play, and that's realistically the difference between Preston right now and where Oakley is and Werribee is. They've got 5, 6 players who have played 151 games together, and that's the difference between the good sides and the next tier.
Yes. It's one of the challenges, isn't it, is keeping a team together. And I know, talking to you and others over the last 12 months, that's been one of the problems, is retaining those enough senior players to develop the younger players as they've come through.
It's just crucial. And we hear a lot on the 1860 club. The interviews that have had has been the fact that the camaraderie has been so good, especially through the 80s and 90s. But the consistency within the players and how many players would have played 5, 6 plus seasons together. That's how you build premierships.
Yes.
So right now we're right in the start, I believe, of something really big as a club, where we've got guys who have played 2 or 3 seasons together. And that, I think, is what's going to launch us to go further as a first 11 group. So yeah, having that consistency with the players and the continuity, it's massive.